Let's have a look at the concept of intertemporal budget constraint. And notice that this is going to be analogous to the budget constraint that we used to do before, where we had two goods like apples and bananas, and we had to trade them as long as our budget, our money, allowed us to. Now in this case, when we have the intertemporal budget constraint, what we are having is consumption in the present and consumption in the future. And we think of it as consumption of a certain good in two periods. And the implication is that if we do not consume in the first period, we can save the money that we do not spend on that consumption and earn interest in the second period. So let's actually work with the math and prove everything. Now, let's work on the intercepts of the graph so we understand what's happening here. These are the extreme points. These are the points where, in this case, we would spend all our money on consumption in the future. So how much can we spend in the future if we spend nothing in the present? Well, we can spend the income that we earn in the future, so that's the money in the future, plus we could save all our money from the present and get interest on that. So 1 plus the interest rate. I hope this makes sense. Now let's do the same analogy in the present. How much can we spend in the present right now if we spend nothing in the future, if we want to spend all our money in the moment? Well, we would have the money in the present that we can spend right away, plus we would have the present value of the money in the future. And we must discount it because the present value of the money in the future is less than what it could be in the future. By definition, since we're not accruing, we're not compounding our interest that we could. So instead of putting the money in the bank, we are consuming it. That's the intuition behind it. Now let's work on the math and see what the slope here, because what is a slope? A slope is a change in y relative to a change in x. In our case, the question is how much can we spend in the present while giving up something in the future as long as our budget allows us to. So how much we can trade consumption now for consumption later. How much can we trade consumption now for consumption in the future. And how do we do that? We need the slope, we need a derivative. The question is what derivative? Well, let's write the math and actually prove it with math, and then we'll reason it with common sense because it's gonna make sense. Now, how can we write a line? A line has an intercept, this one, and the slope. So let's write the intercept. The line we're speaking about is consumption in the future because it's starting from here. This is the same as considering a y and x line, a y and x axis, and we have y equals to a minus b times x, where a is the intercept, b is the slope. But the same logic now, we have, instead of y, consumption in the future, C2, so let's write that. C2 is equal to the intercept, which we calculated here, m2 plus m1 times 1 plus r. 1 plus r. Now, how can we rearrange this thing? Well, we could leave m2 on the right side and take everything on the left side. So we would have m2 is equal to c2 minus m1 times 1 plus r, so that m2 would equal to c2 minus 1 plus r times m1. And the reason I'm writing it is because now we can see an exact shape of this line, an intercept and a specific slope. So what we have is the relationship between income in the present and income in the future, money now and money later, meaning that the rate of change, the derivative of the money in the future with respect to money in the present, is equal to this thing over here. And what does this show us? It shows us that if we want more money, so money to derivative, it means if we change money now by 1 unit, we have to give up 1 plus r in the future. Let me write it in terms of changes, because this is not the easiest intuitive way to look at it, but now I think it's gonna make more sense. So change in y relative to change in x is equal to the change in M2 relative to the change in M1, meaning that if we have one more unit in our current income, increases by 1 unit, our future income would decrease by -1 plus r, because the income that we're having is in the present, and by definition we're not putting it in the bank. We are not accruing interest on it. That's why the income, the potential income in the future, decreases. That's why it's a negative slope. And I hope this makes intuitive sense. In other words, this is our opportunity cost. We are giving up money that we could have put in the bank. This is opportunity cost. So the slope of this intertemporal line, intertemporal budget line, is going to be -1 plus r. I hope this makes sense. We are done.